breathing exercise to ground us. It will also come in handy as we move into some of the other modules related to de-escalation. So I'm just going to ask everyone to settle in to wherever they are physically. If you're able to sit and you want to put your feet on the ground, if you're standing, that's okay wherever you are. Maybe you'll feel your back against a surface, just whatever allows you to connect and be present. We're going to do a brief breathing exercise. You can put one hand on your heart if you'd like, and one hand on your stomach. So I'm just going to ask you to inhale for a count of 3, and then pause, and then exhale for a count of 3. And I'll do that 4 times with everyone. All right, so let's start. So inhaling, 1, 2, 3, pausing. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3, pausing. Inhaling again, 1, 2, 3, pausing. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3, pausing. Inhaling, 1, 2, 3, pausing. Exhaling, 1, 2, 3. Great. It was nice to see people doing it together. I really felt that energy from everyone on the call, so thank you so much. So this is our schedule for the day. We're going to start off with this brief introduction, which we'll tie up in the next few minutes. We'll then move on to our de-escalation module, which will be led by Danny. We'll take a break from 2:30 to 2:45 before moving on to a module about manic episodes, which I'll be leading. We'll take another break and then finish up with AMJ leading our module on alternate realities. And then we'll do a brief close at 4:45 and finish up the day. Last week was a great start. We started off last week. There was tons of very rich feedback that everyone participated, shared with us. There's lots of positive feedback about all the knowledge that was exchanged, how open this forum was. I think it really spoke to the strengths of the abolitionist model. We tried to incorporate the feedback from last week to make some shifts and changes to make today work. Some of the things that folks had to say were that the chat rooms were great, but at times a little bit distracting. So we do have someone managing the chat room a little bit more. We've also tried to put in some structure using the small groups. So we're going to be facilitating the small groups, encouraging people to direct their feedback during the small groups, and then we'll be debriefing afterwards. So really trying to encourage the discussion, not discourage it in the chat, but really encourage it in the small group discussion where there's smaller groups of people. Another piece of feedback was that the content is incredibly important, but that it's a lot to digest and think about. So we are trying to put more time into the small groups. We're also going to provide very specific instructions for the wellness room where people can go if they feel like they need to take a break from this content. And we're also going to try our best to honor the break time and truly leave it as a break and not do any discussion or content during that time. Finally, folks had to say that the small groups were helpful, but would be even better with structure. So we've made some adjustments. We have facilitators leading our small groups today. We have specific prompts and discussion questions to make them a bit more structured. And then each small group will debrief afterwards and try to bring all that feedback together. Just wanted to give a moment to provide clear instructions about how to enter the wellness room if anyone does want to take a break at any point and receive some additional support.
For the wellness room, just email cat911 or send a direct message and I'll give you the precise instructions directly.
Great, thank you so much. And then some guidelines for the chat room. We absolutely encourage people to contribute. This entire effort is meant to be collaborative and community oriented. But we're trying to structure it a little bit more so that it's not so overwhelming. So we will do a question and answer after our breakouts, our small groups. We're going to try to focus on covering the content for first, directing discussion to the small groups, and then introducing more larger group discussion after the small groups, just to keep things a little bit more structured. And our guidelines for the small groups, we're trying to keep them a little bit smaller to the best of our ability. We also have assigned facilitators for each group who have our prompts and guiding questions. They're going to be a little bit more structured. We're also asking that facilitators who are present, if you could go ahead and just identify yourself, we're asking that you rename yourself as a facilitator. That way, when we create the breakout rooms, we can make sure that there is at least one of you in every single breakout room. So if you could take a moment to do that now, that would be great.
Do you want us to just add the word facilitator to our name?
Yes. Yeah. So like I put speaker and then put Rupi with my pronouns. So you can put facilitator in your name and your pronouns if you'd like.
Perfect.
And then I also want to make sure we cover the Google Docs. AMJ, do you mind explaining what those are for and how people can access them?
I was talking and you couldn't hear me. Yes, so what is happening? We've got a couple of things going on where we want to make sure people have a chance to document their responses to the prompts and the exercises we have. So your facilitators have links to Google Forms, very simple. Here's the topic, here's the scenario or the prompt, here's the question. And we'll add in on the form what y'all come up with in response to the guiding questions that we propose for each of the small groups. No big deal if none of it has to be assigned to anybody's name. It's just a group effort. We're not even labeling which group submits it. We're not collecting any information. If you feel like you really need to discuss this further with us, by all means, you can ask that your name and contact info get added to the comment, but otherwise, no worries. We'll just put it in and that way we can have the feedback, the skill share, excuse me, for the small groups.
Thank you so much. So we're about to transition into our first module on de-escalation. And the general format for each of the modules will be Danny, AMJ, or myself will first start off reviewing content, and we'll try to move through it without doing any question and answer during that time. We'll go over some strategies for intervention. The three of us will then model a scenario. We'll then move into the small groups, and which will allow people to participate more in discussion. And we have the prompts and the guided questions, and also the Google documents for people to share their input and make things as collaborative as possible. And then we'll finish each module with a structured debrief where we come back together for about 10 minutes and engage a little bit more as a larger group, just to sort of imagine what solutions might be to these challenges that we're looking at today. Before we start off, just a review of some of our community agreements. If you're comfortable, please share your names and pronouns when sharing. You can change how you're identified on Zoom. We ask that you please respect all identities and background. We really want to support everyone's self-care, safety, and privacy. Please email the CAT 911 email address if you want to break out into the wellness room. No photography, recordings, or screen sharing allowed. Never share any personal or private information, please. And we'll do our best to provide trigger and content warnings to keep everyone safe. So I think that should be it. So I'm going to stop my share and I'll turn things over to Danny.
Hello again. Can everybody hear me? This computer's a little wonky. Cool. Let me grab my slides real quick.
Would it be okay to introduce myself as the chat monitor since we do?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
All right, perfect. Hello, everyone. It's really great to see everyone here with us today. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Liv, and my pronouns are Aya, they, and them. And today I will be your chat monitor. So if you have any questions that you prefer to ask privately, please feel free to go ahead and privately message me. And I can go ahead and bring them up to our speakers and facilitators for today. So that way we can address them as a group together. So thank you so much. And I'm excited to share this space with y'all. So, perfect.
Sorry, I always like, I'm such an old man. I'm like trying to find the full screen again. Give me 1 second. Oh my gosh, why is it? Okay, anyways, sorry. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
You can see the slides. Okay, great. So, okay, hi again. My name is Danny. They, AJ pronouns. I'm here in beautiful Long Beach, California, on Tongva land. The speed at which I'm talking is too fast, interpreters, please let me know. We want to be cognizant of, speed and timing and everything else also. So let's get started. So I love this little graphic, right? It's like taking the temperature. Another organizer told me that last year, and I thought that's a great way of doing it. It's kind of like a chart when you take your kids to the pediatrician, right? But I thought that was great. So let's get into it, right? So for this
Annie, I'm going to interrupt. Just someone requested if you can make it full screen so it's bigger for people to see, please.
I think in the upper right corner where it says present, that should probably make it full screen.
I don't know where that is.
So right next to the share button.
I'm sorry?
So right next to the share button, kind of next to your icon.
Yeah.
There's a yellow button at the top that says share.
Next to that button will be present.
Okay, yeah.
I think they're talking about Zoom as opposed to, like, do you have any Zoom options?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do right now. Let me.
Don't click on share, click on present. Right next to share.
I understand. I can't even get it on my screen to be full screen. So that's the problem right now. So just give me 1 second. Sorry, everybody. What the hell is going on right now? Oh my gosh. Okay, give me 1 second. See, now it's full screen. I don't know why this is doing this.
It's a lot of stuff, right? Are you trying to present from within PowerPoints or are you trying to present from within Zoom?
From the Google Slides.
Or from the Google Slides. Okay, pop over to Zoom and then you can share your screen there. And you want to then pop over to the Google Slides, and you see where there's that orangish yellow button. Don't click that, click the one next to it.
That says present.
Yes.
Presenter view.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Is that work, everybody?
It's doing a weird, there we go. It's taking a minute to load, but you are visible and big screen now.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
You're
Sorry.
welcome.
I am a little, I told you all, I'm an old man.
There's a meta level to it.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, great. So everybody can see the slides. Great. So objectives of de-escalation. Let me go to the overview first. So this section, I'll go over objectives, then some principles of general de-escalation tactics and strategies for de-escalation as well. I will give a little short personal testimony on how I personally do de-escalation in situations. And then I will give you two sort of personal examples, but it'll make more sense when I frame it with my background. It was also done specifically to be unique from the other examples and not have as much overlap, and also to provide people with, kind of think outside of the box, because it's not necessarily just a person, you come across walking down the street that you need to de-escalate, right? So, or help de-escalate the situation so they're not in harm's way. And then we're gonna go into breakout, give you the example and go over it. Then we will go into breakout room 1, bring it back, and then repeat for section 2. And then we will end with some collective, meditative, and cleansing breaths. All right, so let's get started. Objectives of de-escalation. So we want to ensure the safety of everyone, right? So we want to help the person or people that are in distress manage their distress and regain control over their behaviors. We want to avoid the use of restraint if at all possible, right? Avoid coercive interventions that escalate agitation rather than de-escalate agitation. So, some principles to remember is that you're trying to help this person, right? It also requires respecting their autonomy though, right? So this is where it gets kind of difficult, rather than using a coercive approach. So it is important also that your body language be equal to with what you're saying, right? So if the person is like in a state of mania, as we'll talk about in the next section, they might feel triggered by your body language as well, right? So they might feel that you're insincere or that you're patronizing them, like talking down to them, or even like faking it, right? And that might make them more agitated and even more upset and angry. You want to monitor the people and the community around you, like especially if you're outside, right? I mean, we don't call the cops, but it's a very real possibility that neighbors or passersby might do that, right? So it's important to be cognizant and aware of your surroundings as well, right? And make sure that other people are not potentially escalating the situation that you're trying to help de-escalate, right? So I think that's very important as well. And also prioritize your safety as well. Make sure that you have an exit strategy. So if you're not feeling comfortable with the situation, if you're by yourself, then, that's for you to make that call. I personally, when I give my testimony, you'll see what I mean and kind of how I roll, but that's, that's just me. I can only speak for myself. So some strategies for general strategies for de-escalation is, again, respecting someone's autonomy and their personal space while maintaining a safe position. don't try not to be and do not be provocative to the person, right? Yelling, loud noises, my experiences have not been helpful, right? I'm sure all of you have gone through that as well. Establishing verbal contact, being concise, keep your messaging simple and clear, especially if somebody isn't lucid, right? And we'll talk about that in the Mania section. Identify the person's wants, feelings, and possible needs, immediate needs. And listen, listen closely to what the person is saying to you and how they're saying to you. Are they agitated? Are they like, up? You want to bring them down, right? So agree to agree, or you can agree to disagree with them. Set clear limits and boundaries as well. And we want to offer choices and optimism as well. A couple more things is that your hands should be visible, going back to body language. You don't want to stand like this, kind of, your hips like sideways, right? Avoid putting your hands in your pockets, like I just said, or crossing your arms or having your fists balled. And also, people might think you might be trying to hurt them rather than help them, because as we know, unfortunately, the system is violent and reacts with violence, right? Usually reacts with cops. So that's absolutely what we want to avoid. Avoid directly facing the agitated person. You can stand at an angle to the person, as to not appear like you're squaring up with them, right? Like your shoulders are, your, again, body language is important in this. You want to remain you want to appear, again, the next point, calm, and your facial expression is important as well. Too much excessive direct eye contact for some folks, especially staring at them while they're talking, can sometimes be interpreted as a aggression or aggressive behavior, right? So, and also, again, closed body language, as I stated, such as, folding your arms or turning away, can communicate a lack of interest, right? So it's really reading body language, like making yourself more intuitive to how to look at somebody that's in crisis and how to approach that, right? So let me give you a little bit of my background. My name is Danny. Again, they, them, AJ pronouns. Personally, I live with bipolar disorder, and I have other physical disabilities and learning disabilities as well. My personal experiences is going to shape how we do these examples for breakout rooms. So personally, I am a person that I've been an organizer for over 15 years in Los Angeles, and San Francisco and other places that I've lived, but I'm from LA. And I was actually housing insecure myself and houseless, however you want to frame that, until actually today I got my keys to my the house that I'm sharing with some awesome roommates. So I understand from a personal aspect. I'm a very emotional person and an empath, so I understand innately how my experience shapes how I de-escalate situations, because I can empathize with that person that is having either an episode or that is in crisis, right? And that being said, not everybody has to have personal experience or, that kind of lived experience to help people. But again, going back to intuition, and, we have a lot of people on this call. Like, look at this call, we're so diverse, right? Like, so you have personal experience, whether you think or not, that can help shape how you help people in crisis and how you de-escalate. So my point is really like, you have it in you, I'm just providing extra tools to help you kind of think about it in your own ways. I mostly do organizing around tenants' rights work. I am building a tenant collective in Long Beach right now. And also I do a lot of reclamation work. So in common terms, it would be, squatting a house or a property and taking it over, establishing, residency that way. And, now I've learned about land trusts. And so if folks are interested in that, feel free to DM me. I can give you more information. And my de-escalation work with tenants' rights is mostly through eviction defense work right now. So that's actually what we will be talking about for de-escalation. So, sorry, too fast. Going off of what I just said, we're going to give an eviction defense sort of general overview. There are multiple things that will be going on when you're doing eviction defense work. So, and I think this is just useful for folks to know in general, considering there's a housing crisis, there's been a severe housing crisis, right? So for example, let's say a person has just been evicted from their home and their landlord is threatening to call the sheriffs or police, depending on the area that you live in. In LA, the sheriffs usually do the lockouts and the illegal or the evictions. So the landlord is threatening to call the sheriffs or the police if the tenant does not leave. So what would you do in this situation? So I want y'all to think about, how you would help this tenant, what kind of information you would give them, what kind of resources are available, what kind of rapid response would be needed to help this tenant stay in their home, right? So personally, for me, there are different levels and different types of situations. All evictions are violent, in my opinion. All evictions equal death, especially now during the pandemic. And, housing is a human right, and it's not just a cute phrase we say, right? So to me, keeping people housed is my number one priority. So personally, for me, actually that's for the second part, so we'll go into that later. But so yeah, so here are the questions to think about. A person has just been evicted from their home. The landlord is threatening to call the police or the sheriffs if the tenant does not leave. So how would y'all work with the tenant who is in this position? What would you do to help de-escalate the tenant and their obvious fears? And how would you keep them safe? So please take the time right now to discuss this scenario in your breakout rooms. Again, there will be a facilitator in each room, and the facilitator's job is not to be overarching or authoritative. It's just to foster conversations from the feedback we got from last week's training. And then we're going to go ahead and bring it back to the larger group. And if this is triggering for you, I'm sorry, I should have started with that. Please feel free to stay in the larger room, or please feel free to, opt out of the small groups, or also if you need to take a breath, if you need to take time, please message us and you can go into the wellness room as well. We will also have a Google form for each small group, and we will drop those in the chats for y'all to fill out and give us feedback for as well. So let's get to it, my friends, my comrades. Let's do this.
How long is the small group for?
20 minutes. So it's 1:54 right now. So we'll come back together at 2:14 p.m.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you guys.
Andy, if you can hear me, for the wellness, should I stick tight here instead of joining the room?
Yeah.
Well, thanks.
This is so annoying. Did it again. Okay, can y'all see it now?
Yay.
Great. Like Tony the Tiger, great. Not to, propagandize sugary cereals that, that's
Let people enjoy the sugary cereal.
Let us have some fun, Danny.
It's a palindrome outside.
There's no ethical consumption under capitalism, right?
None.
Do we have the majority? I can't see how many people are in it. Do we have most critical mass back?
Yeah, maybe I think we're missing about 9 or 10. I'm not sure who left versus are having other technical issues.
Well, we will.
All the rooms are closed, so if anyone's not here, they've left.
Okay, great. Let me again drop the Google, excuse me, the Google form into chat.
I did also update that with the questions from the slide. So
great. Thank you so much.
It should look different.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you. All right, everybody. Thank you. My group had a lot of amazing feedback. I knew there would be some tenant organizers here as well across the country, as well as across California and in Los Angeles and Long Beach in general. So I just wanted to use this example and I was vague about it on purpose so that we could foster a lot of ideas and conversation in these groups, right? And so I think our group did amazing. So please use I'm sure all of your groups did amazing as well, sorry. Please use the Google form that AMJ so kindly made for us to give feedback and responses, feelings, thoughts, questions, concerns, etc. And we'll be moving on to the next part. So content warning, we're going to be talking about law enforcement in this section. So for the breakout room number 2, the sheriffs have arrived, whatever law enforcement in your area does evictions. It's most prominently the LA County sheriffs for where I live, but we have seen an unusual crossover with just regular law enforcement as well, which is not a good sign. So what do we do? Personally, people in my group know, as we talked about, I'm the type of person that I will go and it looks like more escalating before I de-escalate. I know that sounds kind of weird, but I have done what we call lockouts or illegal lockouts by myself. I don't recommend that you do it by yourself unless you have gotten more experience on the ground doing it. I recommend that folks go with a buddy, and optimally, you would have a rapid response team, right? So that's why we're talking about these ideas, talking about these things, getting folks to think about, this is a real life scenario that's applicable to the insane housing crisis that's going on right now. Again, like personally for me, so let me give these questions first. Sorry, I'm bouncing around. So again, a person has just been evicted from their home. The sheriffs have arrived at the house or apartment or the building. to forcibly evict the tenant. How would you work to de-escalate the sheriffs to keep the tenants safe in this position? So personally, for me, I have been a police liaison. I've done it several times. It's not that I enjoy or like talking to the sheriffs, or that I'm a bootlicker or something like that. It's because the end goal for me is to help the tenant stay housed, right, by any means necessary. So if I have to put my body on the line and my resources and time and talk to these law enforcement, I am willing to do that in order to keep this person housed. Other folks, that's totally fine, might not want to do that, and that's fine. There are multiple options of going about this, and so that's why I would like to have this conversation with y'all. Again, please take the time to discuss this scenario in your breakout rooms. There will be a facilitator in each room. And again, their job is to help support and foster the conversations. We'll have another Google form for feedback for this question as well. And then we'll bring it back to the larger group again for a short debrief. Again, if you don't feel comfortable with this topic, that is totally fine. Please stay in the chat, the larger chat. You don't have to accept the invite to the small group. Or if you're feeling a little emotional or triggered by this, that's okay too. Please take time and message us, and we can get you into the wellness room as well to kind of, decompress and whatever you need. So we're here for you. So please, let's get this conversation rolling.
Oh, really quick, Danny. Sorry to interrupt, but I see some juicy stuff in the chat. I just want to remind people we do have our crowdsourced doc. So if you want to look for resources, ask questions that pop up, please feel free to use that so that we can get all that juicy stuff and also maintain the flow. And then if people need to relook at those later, it's there for everyone.
For sure. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I can't see the chat right now from my screen, so that's why. So thank you for telling me that. If folks want to email my personal email as well, I'll drop that in the chat after we do the come back to the larger group. I have resources from across the country as well. And more specifically, more intimately in the LA County area, but also across California and across the country. So if you're interested in this particular work, feel free, I'll drop my email as well, if that's helpful. There are also other folks on this call. So if y'all feel comfortable connecting with other folks as well, please feel free to do that. This is to share as much information as possible, right? So we can better help our communities. So yeah. Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's get to it.
Amy, quick question in terms of the timing. How much time should we give to the small group? Just because it's 2:23 and we were supposed to finish at 2:30, but don't want to shortchange the small group. Do you think we should do 20 minutes still, or should we do 15? What do you think makes the most sense?
How did you feel the conversations went in your group? Do you want 15 minutes, Ruby?
I'm open.
Let's do 15 then, and then I'll close out afterwards.
Okay, so it's 2:23, so we'll go until 2:38.
Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Before we break into groups, we did get some feedback in the direct message. We consider making jokes about older people and consider ageism in our comments, since many people are older in this participation who are participating today. So I just wanted to share the feedback.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry. That's true. I should have thought about that before I said that. So my apologies if anybody was offended by my comments. So I take responsibility for that.
Me too. I'm really sorry.
We're in the breakout rooms now.
Okay, great. Can everybody see that? Cool. All right. So yeah, please again use the Google form for this section for part 2 of the small groups. Yeah, again, I gave a real life experience from my personal organizing experiences, and I've heard a lot of good conversation in our breakout group. Even if you don't do tenant organizing, what Kimberly was saying, they have experience as an organizer, as an activist. You have skills inherently within you. That's what I'm talking about. Like, use your intuition, use your gut, use the knowledge that you have organizing in the community, even if it's not eviction defense, because it's still applicable. If you've been a marshal or done security at other actions, there you go. You know how to de-escalate. If you have built actions with other groups in coalition or just within a group that you're part of, you know how to work in rapid response. So these are all things just to get y'all thinking about, and all the other examples in the rest of this presentation will be definitely a little more in depth and different examples. So I wanted to take a minute. I'm also Korean. I'm part Korean, and I wanted to burn some mugwort for y'all. As part of traditional Korean shamanic practice for protection and healing prior to Buddhism actually reaching Korea, the Korean peninsula. The shamans were actually, it was a matrilineal society, and non-binary, queer, trans people and women were at the forefront of healing and protection. So I'm going to light this, and if we could just take a few collective breaths before we move on to the next section. I think that will be very helpful to release, all these. This is a heavy topic we're talking about, de-escalation. I mentioned, law enforcement and stuff. And I know, especially for us as people of color, that's really, it could be very triggering sometimes. So I apologize if anybody has had any intense feelings come up. And I thank you all for being with us today and being present. So let's just do some breathe in, release. We'll do it 2 more times. Breathe in. And when you're breathing out, I want you to visualize that you're literally breathing out black smoke, all the negative particles and energy in your body, in your soul, in your mind, and in your heart. Let's take one more breath in and one more breath out. So thank you all again. My name's Danny. If you have any questions for me personally or need any resources, please feel free to DM me in the chat. And thank you all so much for being here.
Thank you so much,
Danny.
I can't get out of the there.
Go ahead, Ruby.
Sorry.
I was just going to say we're scheduled to take a 15-minute break. AMJ, Danny, is there anything that you wanted to say before we move on to our break?
I just wanted to say sorry again. I was a little flippant with that ageist comment, and I'm sorry about that. I am human, and I will try to do better. I meant it as a term of endearment too. If that, I'm not going to quantify, but I take responsibility, and I'm sorry for that. So, thank you all for being here.
I think that was a great display of taking accountability or showing accountability and taking responsibility. So bravo for that. So we'll move into our 15-minute break. It's 2:44. We'll reconvene at 2:59, and then we'll move on to our next module.
Etc. Synonyms and similar words you could use, or if you like to curse like me, assholes. Everybody has one. You know, jerks, ridiculous. I say wild a lot in place of crazy. So those are some alternatives. So just to keep in mind the language, be cognizant of the language that we use with each other and also how we project that into the community. So just wanted to uplift that really quickly. Thank you for whomever pointed that out to us, and thank you. Take it away, Rupi.
Thanks. I think that perspective is really important for this section in particular on manic episodes, and is also important for the last section on alternate realities, because we're starting to talk about biomedical categories of illness that are often heavily pathologizing, and there's lots of jargon that's going to be used here, or there's lots of jargon even just tied into the phrase manic episode. So I think reorienting ourselves around a disability justice framework and thinking about ableism and saneism is really important for framing this conversation. So awesome show of collaboration and accountability that keeps us moving forward. So we're going to continue today in this module till about 3:45. We're going to start off with a bit of a grounding exercise, and then do a brief review of mania and what it is, highlighting the different stages of mania, because understanding the different stages of mania helps us think about how to intervene as members of the community. We'll then move on to talking about how to intervene. And then we'll move into our small group. If we have time, we'll do role play amongst the facilitators, but I think we'll really prioritize the small group because the discussion has been so rich there. And then we'll circle back and debrief together. So for this grounding exercise, I'm not going to do a breathing exercise necessarily, but I think this is one really of setting an intention and really circling back to the abolitionist frame. You know, thinking about the term mania and manic episodes, as I was saying, it's really pathologizing in nature, it's biomedical in nature. There's lots of jargon that we're going to be using to try to describe what a manic episode is and what the different stages are. And you know, we really want to create space for people to think about what that feels like, whether or not you agree or disagree with it. This information that we're providing is not prescriptive in any way. In fact, we want to think about reimagining what it would look like to even talk about mental illness, and imagine something more just and healing as far as treatment goes. This is particularly important for manic episodes and alternate realities because these are the areas where so often mental health structures and law enforcement are involved, often causing great harm to people. So starting off with a brief review of what mania is. So mania is often considered a severe form of mental illness. It's usually associated with what's called bipolar disorder, but it can also occur in a variety of other mood disorders as well. People can show signs of mania after using different substances, including methamphetamines and cocaine. There are different stages of mania. Hypomania is one, mania is another, and delusional mania is another. The fourth category that we'll go over is drug-induced mania. And what we want to try to emphasize is that treating the person experiencing mania properly depends on what stage of mania they're in. And as I said before, please maintain that critical framework and bring that discussion to your small groups. We definitely want to encourage that. So just wanted to go over a couple of definitions before we move into the different stages. So there's different language that's used to try to describe the different stages. I think one way of thinking about it is there's language to describe emotional state. There's language to describe actions and behaviors. And then there's language to describe how people are thinking. So for the first category of thinking about emotion, one can think about mood and affect. Mood is sort of what someone is feeling internally, their internal subjective experience, whereas affect is sort of what the outside world is seeing. So sort of the emotion that's being given off. So one way to think of this is that you might be feeling awful on the inside, but maybe you're putting a smile on the outside. So that might be your affect, but your mood might be different. If we think about actions and behavior, speech and activity are usually important things to think about. Pressured speech comes up in some of the next few slides. One way of describing it is to say that it's usually pretty fast speech, and there's a sense of urgency with it. Agitation is another phrase that comes up. It's pretty vague, but one way of thinking about it is it's behavior that can show uneasiness or feeling unsettled and can often be accelerated as well. And then when we think about cognition, cognition relates to how people are thinking, whether or not their thoughts seem well connected to one another or whether they seem disconnected to one another. Delusion is a term. It's usually defined as being a fixed or false belief that may or may not be true. And hallucinations usually refers to seeing things or hearing things that are not actually there. So looking at the stages of mania, the first one is hypomania. So again, the three categories that I mentioned before are related to emotion, thinking, and behavior. So thinking of hypomania, the mood, often the phrase lability is used. That just means that the mood might be, or affect might be changing quite a bit. People might demonstrate signs of like kind of having an elevated mood or feeling kind of high, or they might seem irritable or angry. In terms of cognition or thinking, thoughts are generally like pretty well connected to one another, but folks might jump from one idea to another. And so the thoughts might seem loose and disconnected. And then in terms of actions and speaking or behavior, things might seem a bit increased. So people might be talking a little bit more quickly. There might be that pressured quality where there seems to be some urgency there. And there might also be some behavior that could be outside of the realm of ordinary, like spending a lot more money than usual, or maybe not sleeping as much as usual. The next stage that we wanted to talk about is mania. So it's sort of a more intense form of hypomania. So in mania, again, looking at these three major categories of emotion, thinking, and behavior, mood might be even higher or more euphoric. People might seem really, really happy, or anger and irritability might be stronger or more intense. The emotion that people are giving off to the world might be changing a lot more. So people might seem to be happy one minute and maybe tearful another minute. And then in terms of thinking, thoughts become more disconnected from one another and might be harder to follow. So one idea that comes up is grandiosity. Sometimes people might think that they have special powers or can do things that other people can't do. And that could lead them to do things that could jeopardize their safety. So maybe like walking for very long distances, or doing things that they would not ordinarily do. As far as behavior goes, speech or the way people talk could be really, really rapid. So as I was saying, people might do things that could put themselves in danger that they would not ordinarily do. Sometimes that relates to sexual activity as well, alcohol or drug use, and sometimes people are not sleeping at all. And then the third stage, delusional mania, it's having all of the symptoms of mania, but what's really different here is the way that people are thinking, because people are starting to show signs of either delusional thinking or alternate realities, which we'll talk about in the next section. So people might not be oriented, or they might not know where they are, what day it is, what time it is. They might be confused or thinking that other people are trying to harm them in some way when they're not. They might feel like they have special powers that allow them to do things that other people can't do. And then the fourth category of mania that we're covering today is called drug-induced mania. So the idea here is that this can look pretty similar to symptoms of mania that result from bipolar disorder or other mental illness. The behavior might be similar to delusional mania, especially if substance use is more chronic. As I was saying, people might be really fearful that other people are trying to harm them. So that's what paranoia refers to. And there might be agitation. So people might be moving around a lot more quickly or more erratic with their behavior, and they might be seeing things or hearing things that aren't there. Okay, so now that we've covered some of these different stages of mania, how can we try to use this information to think about what to do? So those categories of emotion and thoughts and actions, they kind of help us think about the best way to safely intervene using an abolitionist approach. I think this also draws upon what Danny walked us through with the de-escalation information. So we really want to try to be respectful and calm and supportive of people. So introducing oneself in a friendly way is a great way to start. That really avoids over pathologizing people. You're just trying to meet someone where they're at and be friendly and kind. Avoiding arguing and debating with people. So people might be thinking really quickly. They might be in a really vulnerable space. So you don't want to push people harder. You want to try to be calm and supportive and respectful. Along the same lines, sort of covering one thing at a time, especially with some of the questions that we suggest that you ask people. Danny talked a lot in their module about body language. And so not chasing down people or following people, but thinking about accompanying people. If somebody needs to walk or move, maybe trying to see if they're okay with your joining them or accompanying them. And then just trying to emphasize being with people, because I think a lot of us are thinking about what can we do to be helpful or supportive. Being with people is actually doing something that can be really helpful. These are some questions that folks can ask if they're worried that somebody might be experiencing this. I'm asking someone, how are you doing? Are you okay? One can also try to check and see, do you know where you are? Do you feel safe? Asking someone whether or not they've slept or eaten recently, it can be a gentle way to sort of check in and see where people are at and try to offer help even. And then also you can offer to call friends or family or other members of the community that the person finds supportive. So is there somebody that we can call? We put a line in here because some of these questions down here, they can put people off, but they are also really important questions to ask. But generally it can be more helpful to ask questions that help you connect to people instead of questions that can put them off. So I think these questions are really important, but might be better to come to later on. So asking people whether or not they take any medication, whether or not they've consumed any alcohol or drugs, and then also asking questions about whether or not they feel like hurting themselves or anyone else. Thinking back to our day one training when we talked about how to support people who are experiencing suicidal thoughts. So keeping in mind our abolitionist frame, we're always trying to approach individuals with respect and no judgment. and to show radical acceptance and to try to support people. So safety is always the number one thing, as we'll see in our next example. So trying to make sure that someone is safe is the most important thing. Keeping in mind that when people might be experiencing mania, things can be really triggering and upsetting. Noises can be really throw people off. So is there a way to support someone walking to a safer, calmer environment? Say if somebody is in the middle of the street and they could get hit by a car or something, trying to encourage someone to get off the street and move towards a sidewalk, trying to accompany them to do that. We've done some breathing exercises here and throughout the training, trying to support people with doing that, offering to call friends, family, and other members of the community that the person might feel safer with. And I hope maybe in our small groups, we can think more together about other resources and safe places to go. So we're going to move into our role play. And I think just in the interest of time, we'll go ahead and move to our small groups. This is the scenario that we have. There are two people who are walking down the sidewalk, and they see a third person walking in the middle of the street with cars passing. And this person is yelling at drivers that she is invincible and the ruler of the world. The cars are swerving to avoid hitting her. Persons 1 and 2 are worried about person 3, but they don't quite know what to do. These are some of the questions that we came up with to help guide the discussion. How would you respond? Have you had any experiences with your own friends and family regarding with people who are experiencing this? And what supports exist to help people experiencing manic episodes that are healing rather than coercive or carceral in nature? So it's 3:19. Just to round up, we'll break into our small groups and meet until 3:40. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming back. We have about 5 minutes left. I think what I'll try to do is maybe just summarize some of what came out of the really rich discussion that our small group had. And then Danny and AMJ, if there's anything else that you want to reflect on from your groups. But heard a lot about working together as a team, which is really important, I think appropriate for this entire training, but really trying to build community and trying to work together with different people to support folks. And another thing that came up in our group is everything that we're doing to try to intervene is supporting and restoring people's humanity. So a lot of what we talked about was engaging someone as a human being. Hi, my name is Ruby. How are you? It's so nice to meet you. Do you need anything to eat? Do you need anything to drink? Just really engaging with people as human beings, which is what we all are, and trying to preserve that. We talked about how that's really important because with manic episodes, this is so often where people do interface with the formal mental health system, which can be so traumatizing and damaging. AMJ and Danny, was there anything else that came up in your groups or anything else that you think you need to highlight before we close out?
Yeah, that a lot of similar things to what you said, Rupi, and also, it made the point of that, going to my point of houselessness and homelessness. Another person also pointed out it can be the inverse, right? So you might be houseless and then also be a person with mental disabilities, such as myself, and your mental state gets exacerbated. Your bad mental state gets worsened and exacerbated because you don't have a stable living situation, or because even because of medical racism, because of all these factors under capitalism combining, right? So that's something we talked about as well. And like to be conscious of, like, when you are talking to somebody, obviously talk to them like a person, but also like, you know, getting them to safety, you know, and also aftercare, you know? So I think those are some of the major points we talked about. So great stuff, everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, in our group, we talked a bit about comfort levels, engaging in certain things like stopping traffic. And there are a couple of us who use wheelchairs, and, you know, whether we are able to do that, use some of that stuff to our advantage and determining when it's actually more of a danger. We talked about like pushing the street crossing button to try to get traffic to stop. And also things like, okay, when we're trying to get the person out of the street, I think this was also just mentioned in the chat, going along with their story. Wow, you know, come over here to the sidewalk and tell me about, you know, these powers you have. Tell me about this mission you're on. Tell me about, you know, whatever they're doing, and to get them to talk about the experience, and what it's like to know these things about themselves, as opposed to just kind of leaving them to follow the things that are coming up in their mind. I think Sarah specifically said, like, you know, we don't want to just leave you to this unsafe thing. We want to kind of guide you, and let you know that we're supporting you. Excuse me. We're not challenging you, and so we just want to know more about you. And Sarah also offered a really great thing, is making sure you introduce yourself, and whatever you're going to ask of that person, make sure you give to them. So if you're going to ask their name, give your name, you know, that sort of thing. And instead of saying, let me help you, you know, can you come over here and do this for me? Tell me about this, or what have you.
That's great. So as we close out, we're going to close out and then we'll move on to a break. I just want to sort of guide people, maybe you might call it a brief meditation, but just a pause. So wherever you are right now, if you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes. I'm going to leave mine open just so I can think clearly and guide you through this. You might put your hands on your knees. You might sit back and feel your back against the back of the chair that you're on. Maybe your feet touch the ground, maybe they don't. Whatever it takes to help you feel grounded. And take some deep breaths in and deep breaths out, and exhale. And with those exhales, really think about the detox and what it means to let go of the way things are done that doesn't work. As you inhale, really try to think about this work of imagining something new, something that we can't even consider right now. As you inhale, take in all of this beautiful positive energy from the people around you in the large group and the small group. Keep in mind that we're in this together. And as you exhale, just try to detox any of the old ways that feel toxic or harmful as we think about something better. So we are going to take a brief break. I think we'll take a break. AMJ, if we take a break until 4 o'clock.
4.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think that's great.
Okay, let's do that.
All righty. Started, Connor. Okay. Here we go. We are recording again. Are we good on people? I might give it another minute. Oh, let's see. course, we need to wrap up at about 10:02 because as you have been told, we're gonna repaste that in the chat. There's going to be a wellness webinar at 5 p.m. immediately following today's session. It is going to be awesome. We've been doing these webinars for a few months now, and it's just some time to get instruction on ways to heal in the space of COVID and isolation. And so you're going to be doing some beading. Ooh, beading is medicine. Repost that link, please. It got cut off. And so we've done yoga, we've done meditation, we've done journaling, we've done Reiki, all kinds of things on the first Wednesdays and third Sundays. You can sign up on the CAT 911 website as well. Okay, so we are going to talk about alternate realities, and I am going to start sharing my screen again. Please holler if it does not share as of, hold on. Now, yell if you do not see this slide that's white that says alternate realities, also known as psychosis.
We see it. We got you.
Beautiful. Okay. So I'm coming off of Rupi's section in a kind of a lovely segue, because we talked about someone who was having a manic delusion, right? And that is, there's serious overlap with what we call, quote unquote, psychosis, which is a severe mental disorder in which thought and emotions are so impaired that contact is lost with external reality. That is from the Google definition. I kept it, you know, not DSM evil manual. And I want to just put in a caveat there. I have a master's in social work. I'm working on my hours. So I'm an associate clinical social worker. I'm also working on a PhD in social work. So these things are really important to me. And I will be speaking from a blend of professional knowledge and like, fuck that knowledge, okay? I do this, you know, I said earlier that one of my favorite professors said that social work is the handmaiden of the status quo. And I've stuck with this field because of that. I want to flip that upside down, right? That's not how we actually, well, it is how we started, but it's not what we said. So to keep that in mind, that's why we kind of called this alternate realities. Like, is a person really psychotic? Is that a great thing to say about someone? Or are they just experiencing life a bit differently than we are? So the general idea, very similar to what you saw in the Manic episode section and in the De-Escalation section, right? You do want to empathize with the person, what they're experiencing. You don't have to say that you're seeing or experiencing the same hallucinations or delusions, as we'll quote unquote call them. You definitely don't want to argue or be judgmental. Like, if the person says that the stoplights are jumping up and down, like, you may not see that, but that's what they see. You don't have to say that they're wrong. And you don't have to say, oh my God, I see that too. If they're experiencing distress and they recognize that they're experiencing distress, you can help them work through that distress, right? You definitely don't want to make it worse. And they can also, you know, kind of say, okay, well, when this happens, this is what I do. And I will pause there to say, a lot of times, not all the time and not never, but a lot of the times, when someone is going through a psychotic episode, they kind of know that they're not fully in touch with reality, right? And so they'll say, this is, you know, the voices are telling me something, or the people over there are saying something, or they may feel unsure, right? And that's really when you can help talk with them on a more practical, I guess is a word I'll use right now. But regardless, you don't want to raise your voice. You don't want to mock the person. You definitely don't want to be sarcastic with them, because regardless, they're gonna catch on. If they're in a fully present within the same reality as you mental state, or if they're not, they're likely gonna catch on to you treating them with disrespect, right? So do speak clearly and simply. You don't have to yell at them and talk slowly as though there is something they can't process, right? Just make sure that you're not mumbling or talking too fast. And do allow them time to process what you're saying, because they do have a lot going on that they're trying to suss through. Still don't assume that they can't understand you, right? And so following that, on an abolitionist perspective, you definitely want to respect the person's autonomy in making decisions for themselves. We often assume that someone who is living with schizophrenia, per se, or for example, has no ability to make decent decisions, right? But you have to think about the fact that, yeah, this person is still alive. They may actually be clean and smell great that day. They are coming to you or talking to you, and they recognize that they're talking to another person, right? They're doing all of these things to keep themselves alive and generally safe. So the person has some ability to make decisions for themselves, right? So you want to talk to them and see what they feel like will help them feel safer and more in control of what's going on with them at the moment in their lives in general. If they do want resources, by all means provide them. They don't have to necessarily be like the professional resources. Well, let me call the county DMH or Department of Mental Health, or let's call, this therapist or the psychiatrist. It could really be like, well, there's this group that's taking place in this building that we happen to be across the street from, or I'm gonna pop onto Zoom with you if that's something you can do. They may already have peers who they can lean on, family who they can lean on, who can help them, right? When they're having a break with the reality that most of the rest of us do know. So ask, like, who helps you out throughout life? And they may say, my mom. And like, can we call your mom? They may say yes or no. And so just take it step by step. But just because they're viewing reality differently doesn't mean they're a threat to anybody or that they require intervention. So one of the things you want to do is figure out whether that is an issue. Are they at risk of being harmed or of causing harm to, whether it's to themselves or anyone else, right? And so, we freak out about people who don't seem to be quote unquote acting normally. And that's really the stigma that we've been ingrained with in our society. So keep that in mind. Which leads us to this question: is it even really psychosis, right? We talked about this jargon, these labels, this language that's all pathologizing. And that's because the mental health field, the medical field, they're all dependent on diagnosing people. Why? Because what are we paying for is what the insurance companies say, right? And then there are laws around what you can charge for if you claim a certain title. And then if you're going to pass the records along, we need to have some sort of common language and understanding of what we're dealing with. And so the best way to do this is the scientific mumbo jumbo that is, what is wrong with this person, so that we can justify our charges is really, and our doing our work. It's really what it's all about. And on top of that, we've got a bunch of different spiritual beliefs that factor into a lot of people's lives. And for all the cultural competence stuff that gets tossed around, and the diversity and equity and inclusion and all of that, nobody's really getting great training on how to bring that into the therapy room. Nobody's asking you to be the high priestess for for your clients, right? But they're asking you to recognize that that person has a non-mainstream or even potentially mainstream belief that impacts the way they interact with the world. And there are other cultural considerations that aren't understood, which lots of us know about in terms of, Black people don't go to therapy, Latino folks keep it in the family, Catholics always just confess things, et cetera, et cetera. And then just in terms of there's something that is stereotypically put forward. In some other cultures, this person who we call schizophrenic would be upheld as, an oracle. And there's truth to that, right? A lot of things that we pathologize are actually upheld as connections to be respected. And that person is a medium of some sort for spiritual purposes. And the community rallies around that person and makes sure they're supported and believed instead of pathologized and punished. I don't see any chat or anything, so please somebody holler if I'm speaking too quickly. So along with that, my experience is that I was the therapist for a local community college. And so I saw adults ranging from like 17, 18-year-olds to 70 years and up. And they were supposed to just come. I was given an easy assignment because I used a wheelchair and I couldn't go all kinds of places. And so we'll just give you the easy people. Well, that's not what was happening. Most of the folks, the students that I saw had been in therapy for years and were still in community college so that they could get free therapy. We had everything ranging from academic difficulties, just adjusting to the fact that they're in community college instead of their 4-year, or they're in college and didn't get a good K through 12 education and struggling. They may be having family difficulties ranging from their documentation status to abusive family members to everybody being doubled up, tripled up. Most of my students were uninsured, but they got free counseling as part of their student fee, which was like $20 or something like that. A lot of them did experience housing and financial instability of all sorts. And everybody I saw, except for like 3 people I could name, had major trauma and grief histories, whether they had been abused, whether they had rough experiences migrating to this country, or different kinds of assaults, loss of family members, abilities, things of that nature. And so these people were all experiencing some sort of incident of a visual or auditory quote unquote hallucination, right? Something that nobody else was experiencing, but they were experiencing and didn't know what to do with. And so for many of these folks, trauma was a big deal. And we'll be talking about PTSD in the last week of our training, but trauma will cause folks to have hallucinations, right? And we're not just talking about the flashbacks and things of that nature, but if you're so stressed, you're so hyper vigilant that you're always worried about someone harming you, you start to feel like someone's harming you, even if that's not happening, right? So this can show up in lots of different ways. And then on the other hand, everybody except for 2 people I can name for you were of African, Indigenous, Latine background, and may have also had some sort of charismatic spiritual beliefs, meaning like maybe they were Christian, but they believed in speaking in tongues and having visions and things of that nature that don't often get welcomed into mainstream society. And of these people who had these severe experiences, disruptive experiences, many of them, when I inherited them, did not know that they had been diagnosed with things like schizophrenia, post-traumatic stress disorder, schizoaffective disorder, which is bipolar and schizophrenia, right? So they didn't understand what was happening to them in their lives in general, and why coming to therapy wasn't really helping, but they felt like they needed to keep coming. And so in some cases, I was able to help students, realize, they would say, you got crystals, and I see there's this over here. I've been thinking about tarot, or meditation. Sometimes I go into a trance, or some people came out, are you a witch? And I'd be like, hell fucking yeah, I'm a witch. What you want to talk about? And so being able to incorporate that really helped a lot of my students figure out, oh no, okay, when this thing shows up for me in the middle of my chemistry test, like that is stress. And that is related to the academic difficulties I'm having, which is related to the fact that my housing is unstable, and related to the fact that my family has a bunch of other stuff going on, right? But when I'm just washing dishes and I know somebody who has passed on is showing up in my kitchen, well, maybe that's a visitation, and that's somebody that I can work with because they're not scaring me. Or when I am just stressed and my beloved animal who has passed on comes to talk to me, like I don't have to worry about that, because that is part of my grief process, and it's okay for me to engage in this way because the animal is not telling me to harm anybody or giving me any sort of distressing messages or anything like that. It's just part of the way I'm processing and I connect with the spirit realm. But we don't bring that into our work on a welcoming basis, right? And I can't really see y'all. If I flip out of this thing, it'll probably kill my screen share, so I don't want to do that.
There's a couple things from the chat. Well, people are really liking what you're saying, but a couple thoughts for people who can't see the chat is there's some suggestion around language that it could be unshared beliefs and experiences, and another possibility on reality instead of external reality, maybe we could call it consensus reality.
Thank you all. And this is one of the things that goes along with this question I have, right? Have you ever been erroneously pathologized? Because we're talking about, mainstream and there's all this language, and I have to admit that as a therapist, as a social worker, I am preparing to take my test, and I'm trying to make it so that I feel more comfortable using this language, and I don't think about other ways of discussing it. So consented reality is a great one. Unshared experiences, does that sound like, did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, unshared beliefs or unshared experiences.
Unshared beliefs or unshared experiences versus consented reality, beliefs, experiences, right? And so I just kind of want to know if anybody wants to turn on their mic and holler so I hear a chorus. I won't see you if you like put a thumbs up, but you can do that too. If you've ever been erroneously pathologized, and it can be mental health, it can be physical health, but who knows what it's like to be mislabeled.
Lord, let me tell you.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yes,
very much so.
definitely. Yeah, I'm hearing most of the
lot
and the women in this group. Yeah.
So yeah, this is not a strange.
Please don't misgender me.
Right. And that's a pathologizing issue as well.
In general, I didn't mean specific, sorry.
No, it's fine. I think though that's also important, because people do get misgendered because their gender identity is dismissed as some sort of psychosis frequently, right? And that's not even a thing, at least anymore, in our diagnostic manual. Not the same way. That's another conversation, but it's not labeled the same way. It's definitely treated the same way by some therapists. So we know that people get called and labeled all kinds of things that are not accurate because they're either flat out wrong or they don't take into account everything that the person is going through. So oftentimes folks don't get the support they need. They don't get the right kind of environments they need, all of that sort of stuff. And we might find them in a situation it's really tough. So first and foremost, it's like scene safety. When you show up, see if anybody is hurt, and especially the person that you're showing up to support, and that there's medical intervention. Call your street medic teams. If you have basic life support training, be prepared to use that. You always want to talk to the person in a calm and non-threatening tone of voice. You'll be very welcoming, be kind and polite. You can talk to them just like you would talk to anybody else, quite frankly. Hey, how's it going? Are you okay? How can I help you? How can we help you? Don't touch the person without permission, though. I mean, I don't have to be in any sort of stress. If somebody touches me, I'm at least flinching quite strenuously, if not swinging. Okay, so like nobody really wants to be touched randomly by a stranger.
AMJ, sorry, AMJ, to interrupt. I do see that we have a participant, Jessica, who has their hand raised. Is it okay if we allow them to have the floor to ask?
Can we hold that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just raising my hand to concur with being,
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. I'm just noting the time, and so
yeah, no, that's okay.
We think about to kindergarten. Keep your hands to yourself, right? And if somebody asks asks you to do something, help them out. If they say, please go get me this chair so I can throw it through the window, no. But if they say, please, can you call my mom? Yeah, right? If they say, please, can you come sit with me? Yeah. Whatever that person needs that can help them feel more in control. If they ask you, do you see something that they're seeing? You can say, no, I don't see that, but that doesn't mean you don't see that. So, how can I help you work through this, right? If crisis staff arrives, please excuse my dog. My neighbor's out playing basketball, and he is very upset. So you want to advocate for the person who the staff is here for, right? You don't want them to be taken to the hospital by force. You don't want the police putting them in cuffs. You don't want any of these further traumatizing issues. You say, I'm here to support this person, hang around in case they decide they do want to go to the hospital with you. If you can do that, otherwise let us handle this, right? Always make sure you have an exit strategy, because most of the time, people who are experiencing an alternate reality is, they're going to harm themselves versus you or somebody else. But in the process, maybe you're in danger of something as well. Just make sure that you can get out safely. And maybe that also means helping that person get out safely, right? If crisis staff arrives and demands to take them, because sometimes they get a little gully, then you can move with that person to a safer place, right? To get away from the crisis staff. Or if you find that, there is a danger situation and we need different kind of support so that you can just be out of the way. Because if somebody is throwing furniture around, that's not the safest place to be, but it's very much less likely that you're going to be the target of that. Very much unlikely, I should say. So like I said, crisis staff, which typically includes law enforcement, they can make the situation so much worse. I don't have to spell out all the stats for how many people experiencing mental distress get shot and killed by the police. Make sure you can provide a safe physical space without restricting movement. So if you notice the person is going for dangerous items, maybe you and the people who else may be around you can kind of move those items away, but still allow that person to access to pace and do whatever they need to do. Definitely do not threaten the person, challenge them, argue, or raise your voice, because that increases agitation. you do want to state things in a positive rather than a negative manner. So instead of saying, hey, you're scaring people, you can say, you know, I noticed that your emotions are kind of high. I get that, it's real. How can we support you? You can say something that might even be a little too much, right? So you might say simply, hey, there's a lot going on. How can we manage this, right? And that's more neutral than saying, wow, you're causing all kinds of ruckus. And if the person seems like it's just too much, or if you're feeling like it's just too much, like Rupi said before, just be there. And you can say, you know, we're just gonna sit here and breathe, and you can get your energy out, you can get your thoughts together. I'm just gonna be here. We don't have to talk. And that often can be very helpful. So the next thing coming up is going to be it's a brief video, and I'll probably scrub through it just a bit. But content warning, it does feature a person who appears to be yelling at like nothing, quote unquote. The camera person does not show that they gained consent to film this person. About that, like, finding something like this video where there is consent is kind of not, it's awkward, right? It would be more of a laboratory type situation, and those typically aren't actually published. So it's short, it's about 3 minutes, but we're not going to watch the whole 3 minutes, I think.
One thing that came up, a question about, are there legal considerations for supporting people? So I would just say we're going to cover that more next week, but I'm going to put a link to a video, and the first half also covers some of the legal issues that we.
Beautiful. Thank you. Because, you know, the Good Samaritan law should cover you, but emphasis on should because emphasis on law, right? We know our system is jacked. And as you watch this video, I want you to think about, you know, the scenario we talked about last section with the manic person who's yelling in the middle of the street, and this person who's yelling out in the streets. Okay. Here we go. The audio is not very loud for parts of it, so.
God. There it is, a grasshopper. Druzy. Susie. By super. Sutures. Suit. Suit. The Y. And the R. Woo. Holy, holy hula. Holy, holy hula. Ole. Okay. I'm not running. Holy, holy, Alea! Bingo. Hey, bro, how are you? Oh, okay. Ollie Oliver. Not much. Album. No, just cut off. The Cooch. What are you up to? And the catcher goal. How what? Garter goal. A quarter cooler. Boom makers. There is a whole Macintosh. That's a good one.
And so, no, go to the next one. We're gonna do well, it won't do the role play itself, but I'll read the scenario. But I want y'all to think about that video and thinking about the Manic episode discussion that we had. And then also this piece where, well, let me pause before I say that, I'm sorry. One of the things you may or may not have heard towards the end is that the person filming kind of did what we said not to do. He started kind of jabbing verbally at this man. And, oh, that's a good one, or what have you. And so that I want to just stress that we do not want to do this. And it was clear that the man was like, I was gonna wait for the light, but I'm gonna run away from this dude because I don't like him. And when we talk about people making decisions for themselves, even as they're experiencing psychosis, like that's a great example. He made that choice for himself, or I should say they, because I don't know for sure the gender identity, but they made that choice for themselves to get away from the person who is aggravating them with the phone camera, right? And so the person having the manic episode may not have been in the same position. We didn't get data on that, right? But we did discuss it. So think about that contrast. And also, you know, what are we gonna do in a different sort of situation? This could be a person with their therapist. This could be a person that you just know. You know, you could be walking down the street and the person once says, hey, so the trees, they're waving and talking to me. And the therapist says, okay, well, tell me more about that, because that's not the experience I'm having. And this actually came from a class of mine. And my professor was the therapist, and they were sharing about a client. And they had a conversation about whether the person, how the person felt about the trees talking and waving, whether it was distressing or not, how frequently stuff like this happens, what the person typically does when this thing happens, and that sort of situation. So I made the mistake of not pasting the questions on a slide, but your facilitators do have them and can copy paste them into the chat. But basically what we're gonna, oh, I lied, I'm sorry. How would you respond to the stranger experiencing an alternate reality? That's the person on the street, right, who was yelling and grabbing their head. And then in the person in the role play, if they say, hey, I'm experiencing this thing, but you're not experiencing it, what would you do then? And if you've had, experience with alternate realities, whether it was your own or whether it was someone that what did you find helpful versus not helpful in dealing with those?
AMJ, a couple of comments have come up that they were concerned about showing the video that wasn't consented to, that perhaps we're violating that person's privacy by watching it, and that it could be triggering for people who might have had similar experience to imagine they too might have been filmed that way, and maybe in the future it'd be better to describe rather than to show a video that wasn't done by consent.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I did, try to include the trigger warning, but I understand the concern. So we are ready to do a what is it called? A breakout group. And if we can, we've got 20 minutes. Well, we want to wrap up at 4:50, right?
Yes.
So I'm gonna pose a couple of solutions. We can do another breakout group that's a little bit shorter, like 10 minutes, or we can do a big group discussion that's also about 10, so that we have time to just kind of decompress from this conversation and this section, and wrap up for the day. What do folks want to do? I'll go ahead and switch over to the video.
The chat is
maybe folks.
It's a mix. It's a good mix.
We do both. In other words, we can get in the small
yeah.
group, and anyone wants to stay in the big group can just stay in the big group.
That works.
You're right in my head. You're right in my head. So go ahead and open up the groups. If you want to join your group, go ahead. If not, I will be out here in the big group. And we will. Let's see, I want to switch to gallery view. There we go. So I want to apologize for two folks who have who were triggered by the video, who expressed concern about the the lack of consent. I did wrestle with whether to share it, and I see that I erred.